What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? It's country boys getting down on the farm. We've got Zach and Will here with us today. I am not gonna try to repronounce your last name there, Zach. You mind doing it for me?
Sure. I'm Zach Ducheneau. It's good to be here. Good to see you all.
You should know. I knew that I would make it really offensive if I tried to sound it out, and you've told me like 3 times, and I'm horrible with it. And then obviously Will Westmoreland, he's been a guest on the show before. You probably follow him if you follow me, or you've seen him around. We do some stuff together. Really great rural advocate. And he does wear a red hat, but the right red hat. Not the not the pedophile protector red hat. So he is out
Thanks
here
for
fighting the good
clarifying
fight. uh, so Zach, we're really excited to have you on. I loved meeting you at Farm Aid, and you have had quite the history in major agricultural politics. Most recently, you were working for the Biden administration. Would you please tell us what you were doing there, kind of what your history is, and how you've gotten to where you are?
You bet. I'll start at the beginning. I was a child of the farm financial crisis, and that's deeply impacted every single thing that I do. I had the good fortune of parents that were really stoic, and I didn't realize how damn poor we were, or I probably wouldn't be here talking agriculture with you today. That led me into a career in agriculture myself, where I needed off-farm income, and I started working as a farm advocate back in the early 90s, helping producers at their kitchen table, trying to create better financial outcomes, trying to access conservation programs. That led to a professional career, if you will, that went through my tribal council's elected leadership, went back to work for the Intertribal Ag Council, standing up a team of technical assistant specialists to do what I had done in the past, and work on reforms, one of which was financial reforms. We created a community development financial institution to do banking and lending like Indians would do it if they had the money, as I explained to my boss, Ross Racine, at the time, and he said, go for it. So we created a CDFI to build a model of finance that functions differently. That work, I think, is probably what caught the attention of folks in the transition team for the Biden-Harris administration. And they interviewed me in December after emailing me to see if I would be interested in seeking a position. And I think it's important to note that when I went into that conversation, I had my, what I thought was my last job. I was the executive director at the Intertribal Ag Council and didn't figure I was ever going to do anything better than that. So I went into that conversation with the transition team in a pretty frank manner. And I said, I think the ag finance system is broken in this country. Otherwise, we wouldn't need farmer and rancher mental health as a matter of federal policy.
Well, and I want to just to jump in on that too, because ag finance is something that impacts every single American, like deeply, like it impacts your daily lives, and you don't realize that most Americans don't understand how important farm finance is, agricultural finance is, and how deeply rooted it is in our economy, in the food we buy, the food we have access to, the way that food is produced. It is arguably the one policy that is the most influential in every single American's life across the board. And most Americans don't understand how that works. And it's all based on policy that came around during the Great Depression, right? Like, I mean, it's still the foundations there and has had no true major overhauls or modernization. It's been changed, definitely, but it hasn't really been updated for the modern agricultural economy. It's just been sort of bastardized and taken advantage of by lobbyists and big corporate farms. Excuse me. Still fighting a bit of a cough. So I want to like point out, you talk finance and people's eyes glaze over, but this is incredibly important. And I think it's interesting because I'm a bit of a nerd and I obviously live in rural America. And I think, it's like talking about how farmers get funded and how all of our food gets from, farm to table is kind of interesting to me. But I really hope that people understand just the severity and why the work that you were doing is so important. And you can obviously elaborate on anything I've just said there.
Yep. Yeah, so went to work for the administration, but first I laid that out. This is what I believe. This is what you're getting with me. And I want to be part of a team that can reform this. And uh, was interviewed several times and offered the position as FSA administrator. And I always couch that as your FSA administrator because I believe in public service and I believe in civil servants. And I would identify as probably more of an FDR Democrat than anything else. And I really frequently use a quote by FDR that goes as follows: better the occasional faults of a government that lives in a spirit of charity than the consistent omissions of a government frozen in the ice of its own apathy.
I
I
love
believe
that.
that. Yeah, that's a great quote, and I've referred to it frequently. And I think that the work we were allowed to do in the Biden administration under Secretary Vilsack's leadership allowed us to really exercise our spirit of charity and community through the policies and programs that we were able to advance. So that's how I landed here. I really believe that when we came in, not only we were in the middle of the global pandemic,
Hmm.
we were in the beginning stages of the farm financial crisis that we're seeing really proliferate now. And the work that our administration did staved that off and allowed us time to work on some of the longer term solutions. Unfortunately, that got derailed in January of 2025, which is why I'm sitting here talking with you from my home on the Cheyenne River Sioux Indian Reservation instead of from an office in DC.
Um, yeah, so I think it's interesting that you brought up kind of the prelim of the farm crisis. Now, Will, you lived through the first farm crisis as well, correct?
Yeah, I was a little kid growing up on a 600-acre beef farm in southwest Missouri. And the only thing that saved us is my grandfather had been in the military for 20 years and had a retirement. And he
Mm.
had a good off the farm job, similar to what Zach was talking about. He was the warehouse manager for a major manufacturer in our rural area, which, by the way, there are very few of those jobs out there anymore. But that's the only thing that saved us. It certainly wasn't farm income.
So, sorry, excuse me, living through that first farm crisis, and we keep talking about how we're on the precipice, if not already knee deep in another farm crisis. What parallels do you see? How do you see this one being different? Like, what is your perspective of the things that got us into the last farm crisis? How is that similar to what's getting us in now? How is it different? And what lessons did you learn then that can help us get through right now?
Let's go back to the 1930s farm crisis that we had first. There was a system of lending created because commercial lending wasn't meeting the needs that producers had, couldn't in some cases, but wouldn't generally speaking. So the farm credit system, as was created back then, as was federal lending directly. And that was to use the largest risk management pool on the planet, the United States Treasury, as a means to support all of that. Fast forward to the 1980s, the farm credit system had made decisions about extending themselves to help producers stay on the farm. And then we had policy changes that I think I've heard you articulate pretty well on your TikTok that upended all of that and undermined that flexibility in the throes of another global economic crisis that started with the oil glut and the Saudi Arabians and others deciding they're not going to export oil, the gas lines. That drove inputs up for our producers and put them in economic hard times. And there was sort of a shift of approach to ag finance then that went from an equity based approach to a cash flow based approach. And when you do that, you shorten up the time frame. And now the reality is most of our lenders, including Farm Credit System, in many cases, there are some notable exceptions, which I'll call out, but the finance terms don't span the commodity cycle. So as the prices go down, as they've done for our soybean producers, we're losing for farmers, losing them from the farm, if not losing them from the planet, because nowhere else in the world does someone feel the pressure to end their life just because their job is going to end at such a rate as farmers do. But if the finance really truly worked for producers, it would span these commodity cycles, and producers would be able to use their equity, use the flexibility offered by their lender, and stay in business and be able to ride that wave back up or pivot to a new production system. That doesn't exist, and it's a function of the fact that we've asked producers to innovate. We've asked seed and feed dealers to innovate. We've asked every other part of the supply chain to innovate, but we're doing the same type of loans that my dad and my grandpa had throughout that period that didn't allow for the accumulation of enough wealth to weather the storm. And that's really what we're talking about now. How do we address this in a way that we can, one, keep people on the farm, but two, fix the system so that they can amass some equity and some liquidity to weather the storm?
So one of the commenters to this conversation here said, it's good to have some turnover in the farm industry anyway. Some families monopolize the industry and get regular subsidies for their crops and are also not farming the land or for not farming the land. And then wanted to say most farmers are millionaires. And I think that this misses kind of the nuance of the agricultural industry at this point. Because unfortunately, turnover doesn't mean what turnover used to mean in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s, right? Where, yeah, maybe one farmer would go bankrupt and their land would go to a different family or an upcoming upstart. What kind of happens now when a family farm can't weather that storm?
Well, far be it from me to pick a fight with a commenter on anybody's page.
Well, and I don't think it's picking a fight. I just think it's obviously experts, and this is something, because I'll give shit to farmers all day long. Especially, I live among them. My family was dairy farmers until, we lost it in the Reagan years when some of these policies came around. All the dairy farms went out to California for some reason, because why not have a really water-intensive place or water-intensive business in a place where, there's famously no water. Not salty about that at all, but the people, and even I, because obviously the way that farmers vote has been really frustrating in the past few election cycles. They've been pushing for conservative policies that actively work against them. Obviously, the tariffs being one of the biggest ones, and electing these people. And so it's really, really easy to be like, fuck the farmers, like they're getting what they voted for, and unfortunately, that lacks a little bit of the nuance of how that also fucks us in the long run, and how not every farmer is this way, and how this turn for the farm community to be more conservative is relatively new and recent, within the past, I'd say, 20-ish years, if I'm not wrong. So, yeah, I don't think you're picking a fight. I think, just clarifying some of that nuance.
I was joking. I'm happy to pick a fight in your comment section. I'm not going to dive into it. But the turnover in farming, let's talk about that, because right now there are three existential crises in agriculture in America. One is we've got producers that are my age and Will's age and older as the average age of the farmer. So we're losing farmers. We're losing them every single day. But the second existential crisis that we have is that the next generation is maybe, I don't know, smarter than you or what it is, but they're not willing to take a look at that as an option. Maybe they didn't have stoic parents like I did. So they're not really looking at that as an option. So that generational transition doesn't happen there. And then we've got folks that are, let me finish.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Then we've got the other part of that next generation that would like to go into farming, brand new, first generation farmers, and access to credit and capital that can allow them to afford to do it simply does not exist. And that's creating a reality, which is the third crisis. We've got producers who are older than Will and I. In fact, the number of 75 plus year old producers increased 17% from 2017 to 2022. And those producers, when they look at the end of their operation, with no next generation in their family to do it, and the need to make sure that they live out their golden years without putting a burden on anybody, have to sell that to the highest bidder. So now you have the big farmer, the really big farmer, the 18% that we tried to convince that they should support the other farmers, glomming onto that, adding that to their portfolio. Yeah, they are millionaires. But the farmer that's selling that land needs to get as much as they can so that they don't put their family in a burden or in a bind just to get through retirement because they haven't been able to amass liquidity. And the reason I stopped there is that's all tied to the current financial system. This cash flow model that doesn't allow for terms that allow a producer to amass liquidity and equity.
Yeah. And I was gonna go to the point of younger people not wanting to get into farming. I think a lot of that is that, like, we're looking at the older generation, where a lot of people do have to have a full-time job outside of farming to support themselves, and where farming becomes, a hobby in heavy quotations, but that's again a full-time job with a lot of risk and a lot of stress, a lot of broken equipment you're wrenching on nights and weekends, and um it's kind of like my dad's an excavator and I ain't an excavator for the same damn reason. I watched us go through the 2008 housing crash, and he went bankrupt, and we almost lost our house, and it's like, yeah, sure, sitting there in equipment all day and running iron is fun until suddenly, you've got a few $1 million worth of iron you got to make payments on, and there's no money coming in to do it, and you can lose everything just like that. And so I think that the younger generation see that. Well, you've got kids, right? Are any of your kids taking over the farm?
Both of my kids are back on the ranch because I practice the stoicism that my dad did, and they've got to see me in my entire professional career go out there and help producers stay on the farm or on the ranch. And I think a couple of things that were unique to my existence that helped that happen. One, when my dad handed off the ranch to my brothers and I, it was a debt transition.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a estate transition. He was still alive, but we made a deal, and I ended up getting to be the one that has the good fortune of managing the ranch, the third generation. But when he handed it over, and there wasn't any, but damn it, do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
We were free to explore, free to learn, free to use our minds. A had the benefit of the work that he and mom had done to leverage that as a foundation to try to innovate. And we started down that path. I took that lesson to heart that the previous generation didn't dictate how I should do this. And as my kids got older and the next generation on the ranch get older, we make sure that they have the latitude to exercise and innovate in their own right. And now my daughter and her husband do effectively most of the management on the place, and they're doing things that we only talked about in my generation. They're doing direct to consumer beef. We went to 31 pastures this year from the 5 that I inherited to do regenerative grazing and soil health building. So that next generation really wants to get in, but I think your story about your dad and his excavating business highlights the problem that we've got, not just in the ag sector,
Right.
but in the financial sector, because the excavators your dad uses, if they're maintained at all, will last 15 years. You go try to borrow money to get that excavator, you're going to get a 5-year note. And now you don't want to farm a ranch or excavate anymore because you see the economic challenges that your previous generation has just to service debt, just to be part of that corporatist system that we've got. I think we got to change the structure of finance and have it look more like an investment in people and the things they're doing than borrowing and lending for the things they're doing it with.
Yeah, and if I could, Jordan, where I pick an argument with people and where I get into it on my lives, et cetera, I can always tell when somebody doesn't understand how a business works when they say, well, farmers are all millionaires, they ought to be okay. Because
Mm-hmm.
farming is a business just like any other business. And there is a big difference between assets and then income. And farming is no different from that. So, yes, it's true that the average quote unquote farmer is worth $1.3 million in this country, but that's typically tied up in equipment and land. And, when people come into this with the mindset that they can liquidate those assets in order to pay off debts that they've got, well, that would be the equivalent of somebody that makes t-shirts for a living selling their printing machine or, their embroidery machine in order to pay off debts. You've got nothing left to create the product that you sell. So whereas farmers in a lot of cases are quote unquote asset rich, many farms are losing money right now, even bigger corporate ag, which I'm no huge fan of. They're losing money right now. So I would say that there's a big difference between the two. And you've got to have that understanding. And I'll really pick a fight here. And, you and I have talked about this before, Jordan. We paint with this broad brush where we say, like I saw somebody ask the question, who voted for Trump? And that comes up every single time we talk about rural America. And the only issue I have with that is like, this isn't me defending the people that voted for Trump, but it's like, okay, first of all, those numbers on rural citizens that voted for Trump, it was absolutely the majority. But where we derive that number from is we look at the top 444 counties in the country that primarily draw their income from agriculture. And we looked at the voting returns in those counties, and that number is like 70%. Okay. Here's what I want everybody to understand. That's a little over 38 million people. There are 66 million people that live in rural America, many of them voters that don't get calculated into the number. If you look at true rural voting trends, it sits at about 60% that voted for Trump. All right. Now, 57% of people with a high school education voted for Trump. Why aren't we out there making the argument that everybody with a high school diploma should be screwed over in this economy and it's okay? Why aren't we making the argument that the 54% of white people who voted for Trump means that every white person in this country should lose every benefit that they've got because the majority of them voted for Trump? So that's the only argument that I'm making. I'm not defending the vote for Trump. I'm just saying guys like you and I, Jordan and Zach and Taylor, we live in rural America. We've been fighting for years to stop this nonsense. So this idea that everybody in rural America has to pay the price for how the majority of people voted, especially to the point you made, Jordan, that the food supply is at stake here, I just think is a non-starter,
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. Oh no, go ahead.
And to take off on that just a little bit, I think one of the traps we fall into is we get pretty easy for external forces to force a wedge in between our common interests. In our administration, we rolled out what we called the Emergency Relief Program, another of those really catchy names that has an acronym that we can use. And when we put that program out the door, we tried to account for the different levels of support that producers receive from the federal government already and tried to move that assistance, which was needed to stave off this crisis, towards folks that were the smaller farmers. There were 82% of the people that were farming that received a higher benefit because of their size of farm and their size of income in the way we deployed that program. And we allowed external forces to drive a wedge between them and the 18% who received a slightly less payment, but yet still received unlimited payment limits with regard to our federal crop insurance. We should have all got around each other and said, hey, this is a congressional deal. They should have appropriated more to help us solve this. But beyond that, maybe we should time travel back to 2000 and have them invest more to avoid it. We need to talk about federal investment when we're talking about agriculture and economy, and not federal spending and find ways to cut budget here. Because anyone that's in production ag knows if you cut costs on your inputs, your productivity will weaken and you'll eventually have to do something different. Maybe that's what's at foot here.
That's a
I
great
think that's
point.
a great point and a good transition. I do wanna point one more thing before we move on from that to something Will said with the average farmer being worth $1.3 million. Averages are very easily skewed by outliers, and there are a few farms in the country that are worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And those bring up that average where there's lots of 40, 80, 160, under 500 acre farms out there that are not worth anywhere near that, or if they're anywhere close to that, it's simply in land value because all of their equipment is from the 80s and 90s. And they're doing this again as a part-time job or a hobby that's really a full-time job.
To that point, Jordan, yesterday on my news feed, and it's no mystery that I'm a Democrat and I believe in democratic principles for government, but the Treasury Secretary was identifying himself as a soybean farmer to say that he's feeling this too.
Yeah.
That there's nothing more offensive to me than that statement being made by that person when I think about the soybean farmer just up the road who really only cast a vote for a future that they believed in. Mm-hmm. We have to look to the motivation of why people vote and acknowledge the fact that farming and ranching, it's about 3.4 million farmers or ranchers based on who's getting payments from the government. They're not swinging these elections necessarily.
Right.
And they're certainly not the demon. They want a better future for themselves and their kids, and they want to preserve a legacy in their operation. We need to find a way to help our message and our vision of how to do that resonate more with them than what they were offered in the last election, because to Will's point, that was a small fraction of the entire United States government that made that choice. And we need, in my party, we need to do better in getting 7 million people to vote the other way so we can continue to advance our principles.
And I think that that's a self-criticism for Democrats to be acknowledged too, is farmers or just rural communities in general have more or less been abandoned by the Democratic Party as far as outreach and integration. Like, I don't get Democrats knocking on my door telling me they're running for office. I don't see the party out here. I'm a member of my local organizing unit for the DFL. I'm the vice chair for it. And we're working on bringing that back in, but the town halls and listening sessions, that went away, and then it seems like every time a rural county or area is flipped, the Democrats have written it off as it's a lost cause, and they go back to where the population centers are, where the money is. And I get it. It's a lot more work for less return to get out here when there's acres between every house rather than inches, and that's it requires boots on the ground and it requires wearing out shoe leather, but it's hard to blame people in rural America, especially people who aren't really tapped into how politics work. They haven't had the education on how politics work. Many of them are not high school graduates or just high school graduates. It's hard to blame them for feeling ignored by a party that has essentially ignored them, even though that party's policies are exponentially better for them.
And I think we need to look at history and understand that it was just in 2003 that South Dakota was all blue in its federal representation. North Dakota was all blue. Montana was all blue. And the other party made that concerted investment that you're talking about in those rural communities. They started with the county commissions. They started with the school boards. Then they moved on to the county electorate and the state level legislatures. They made that move, but that's not the definitive be all and end all of it, because we were there in 84. Reagan carried every state but Minnesota.
Yep. We get to say that we are the bluest state in the country. We're the only state that never voted for Ronald Reagan. And I will throw that. I'll take New York on or California on any day. We are the bluest state in the country. And fight me on it.
Well, I won't fight you. I'll just say you need to get better at doing a national message then.
There we go.
Help us understand.
Yeah.
And all that combined with a concerted decades on decades effort of right-wing news media, propaganda, and wedge issues brought on by right-wing conservatives in rural areas that Democrats have vacated, essentially creating a vacuum. Most Americans still think that communism is this evil thing, or socialism is an evil thing. due to like the Red Scare propaganda of like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, much less, what is relatively new media and new media formats that has, AM radio is still like, AM radio, television, that's still relatively new. And now we have social media. So it's like, it really doesn't take all that much of imagination to understand how things have shifted in the last 30, 40 years. It honestly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, to Zach and Jordan's point too, I want to mention something because you guys know I do polling as well at my firm. The polling in rural America is very similar to the polling in inner city America. It's the politics of discontent. We like to paint with this broad brush when we call it in polling the bigotry factor. Okay, so anytime Jordan and I do social media out here, you can go into our comments and we get hammered with, they're all racist, they're all. But if you look at the bigotry factor in urban and suburban and rural areas, MAGA people poll the same in urban areas for the bigotry factor as they do in rural areas. So it's like the number of them that are racist and don't like marginalized people are pretty much the same in rural areas as they are in urban and suburban areas. But when you look at the polling on why is there so much discontent, it's almost the same in rural America as it is in inner city, urban America. They don't take care of our streets. They don't take care of our schools. We are more dependent on these programs that are being cut. And I think what a lot of us out here on social media are trying to do, like Jordan and I and Zach, I know you're doing this, is getting people to understand the reason you're losing these things is primarily driven by the actions of one single party and one group of politicians. And the more we can make that connection, people will understand. The other thing I wanted to mention is somebody made the comment that black farmers don't get these subsidies, so why are you complaining? Nobody's complaining, and that's not true. Farmers of color do get these subsidies. And as a matter of fact, the reason why we've got to stop what Trump's doing is because in the Biden administration, we had a world record settlement where we offered marginalized farmers over $2 billion. It wasn't anywhere near as much as it should have been. Okay, I want to say that up front. But it was the Democratic administration that put in place programs to set aside in not only the farm subsidies, but in the Infrastructure Act and in the Rural Save Act. I think it might have been called, Zach, keep me honest there. But it set aside specific funds for marginalized farmers. All of that stuff has been eliminated because they're calling it woke and they've taken the funding away for it. So when people say both parties are the same, if you really care about getting money in the hands of marginalized farmers, then you want to vote for the politicians that actually put that in place. Now, was it enough? No. Did it make up for past wrongs? No. But there's certainly only one group of people in one party that were making the efforts to try to fix it. So again, we got to quit painting with this broad brush. We don't want to say things that are untrue just to try to make our political point.
Well, and I think that's I have no time left for the two wings of the same bird people or the both sides are the same people. Like, and I will sit here and I will bitch and moan about the Democratic Party all day long. In fact, before the election, it was almost exclusively what Taylor and I did on this podcast was bitch about all the fucked up things in the Democratic Party because we had Democratic leadership and we had the luxury to have those criticisms of our party at that time. Because it is incredibly flawed. There is a lot of systemic racial issues within the party. There is a lot of corruption within the party. There is a lot of corporate interest within the party. But when it comes right down to it, and I watched a video from a girl from Texas here recently who made this point, and she's like, I've got no fucking time for these both parties are the same people because they are privileged white people from blue states who say it almost every single time. And they have not had to live under true Republican leadership. And she's like, come to Texas, come to Missouri where you are, come to one of these states where people are actively losing their rights to healthcare, where people actively, their schools are closing down, their hospitals are closing down, their rights are getting taken away, trans people are being villainized. It's that much. Come to a state where your power grid shuts down because there was a cool breeze because they privatized everything. And all of that is like, yeah, both parties are flawed, both parties have problems, but one party is definitely not the same as the other, and one we have ins and cracks where we can move the needle towards helping more people. And that's where it's like, I wouldn't consider myself a Democrat, but between the two-party system, that's the party that I have the ability to influence in some way to better my life, to better my community's life, and to better my country's position. And that's where I get really, really frustrated with the two sides are the same rhetoric.
Well, and if you've ever said that, if you find yourself sitting there being like, well, I've said that before, certainly, at least if you still vote for the lesser of the two evils when you have to make a choice, then at least you're staying morally consistent in saying, yeah, technically, economically, they're really both very similar in that they both promote capitalism and will take corporate PAC money and rely on massive billionaire donations in order to make a lot of their campaigns run. But one side is actively harming everyday citizens, and the other is doing some things to help people. Certainly, so
actively harming them less.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
One side has politicians within its party too that are saying we will not take PAC money. We would vote to end Citizens United. We believe that we should get money out of politics. Like, there are Democrats that are in the party doing that. There are no Republicans that I have found in the party that are willing to do that. And they're the ones fighting against it. Now, obviously, we've got our Nancy Pelosi's and our Chuck Schumers and our problem children within our party who very much push the corporate party line. And obviously, we've got all of our frustrations with those. But there are people within the party that are doing the things that we say we want. And so I'm going to vote for the party that at least has some of those people, rather than just being like, oh, I'm going to go vote Jill Stein when she comes out of her cryogenic chamber every 4 fucking years and pat myself on the back, and then talk shit about everybody else for, living in fucking reality. Sorry, my rant's over now.
I love the way you phrase this stuff sometimes. It's awesome. So
I felt the same way about Ralph Nader in that election. He was exactly what was needed to foul the water. But I want to talk about the two wings of the same bird deal, because the point that you're making, Jordan, I agree with. There is a reality in this country, however, that you are not going to get elected without corporate dollars. I hope that our guy in Maine hopes to disprove that. You're not going to get elected.
I'm going to time that out. I mean, AOC got elected without corporate dollars. Bernie Sanders has gotten elected without corporate dollars. I mean, there's more and more politicians taking the stance that it's a political position. It is a campaign position that I am not going to take corporate PAC money. I am not going to take major corporate donations. And maybe they're taking some business donations to the max of what, 2,500. I forget what the campaign maxes are, but like,
exactly, absolutely right. And there are very small minorities that do that, but
it's becoming more popular. And I think that saying that it's impossible to get elected is what got us here. And I'll let you, I'm going to Kanye you here and be like, I'm going to let you finish. But the reality is that, like, Obama was a transformational and transitional candidate in a lot of ways. Some good and some bad. And one of the bad things was he ran on getting rid of Citizens United and getting money out of politics and all of that. And then he went on to raise, but that was the argument, is like, we can't compete unless we use the same tools that the opposition is using. So they're using corporate PACs, we need to use corporate PACs. And then he goes and just fucking fundraises to the moon with corporate PAC money. And suddenly, maybe getting rid of this isn't such a great idea. I like all this money that I can bring in. And that's where it's like, you're not going to have anybody who takes that make that change, or it's very unlikely that anybody's going to make that change, and there's no way you can ever expect the voters to trust you to take those kinds of funds and then make that change once you're elected, So if you're not walking the walk beforehand, we can't trust you to do it once you actually have the position.
So our administration was a beneficiary of a lot of those corporate PAC donations. Mm-hmm. President Biden advanced an initiative, and we moved a long ways towards those initiatives during the time that we had. So two wings of the same bird is not an accurate depiction. And until our vocal minority, like AOC and Bernie Sanders, is able to turn the bird the way the Marjorie Taylor Greens or the, who's our other one over there?
Well, you could say like the Tea Party did, you know.
Yeah. You know, until that can drive the entire entity, then we're going to still struggle. But our bird pushed federal policy and federal support and a sense of community and tribalism towards people instead of trying to exclude them. And I think the dichotomy is that the other side, when it's in power, will do just the opposite. And they don't necessarily adhere to the other conventions that exist. We started at the beginning talking about the fact that a federal budget could be passed if the filibuster is repealed. There is enough Republican support to repeal the filibuster, but we have to ask ourselves, why isn't that happening? Well, then they won't have any Democrat scapegoats. And they're going to have to be fully accountable to that fringe in their party that's driving this conversation, because this isn't your everyday, everyman Republican Party that's doing this. This is the tail wagging the dog. I saw your dog moving around in there, Taylor. But, you know, and we have to acknowledge that when that happens, the producers that are out here that we're all here trying to support and help have a better go of it aren't getting the information, and they aren't having it presented in a way that helps them tie their existence back to an investment that was made a generation or two ago. One of the concerns I heard from producers in an after action meeting after the election in 24, they said, yeah, you guys, I'm pretty sure you did great stuff, but we saw too many 8 and 9 figure announcements and not enough people that you helped. So we got to do a better job at making the connection to the market, the meat poultry expansion program that we tried to offer, and how that resonates with that farm in South Central Minnesota that I had to visit, that was faced with the decision of euthanizing their hogs or giving them away, because feeding them for 3 more weeks in this efficient system makes it so they can't fit down the rail on the slaughter facility. We saw that. We went to work to try to institutionalize changes. That's part of this administration's Rancher First initiative that they just laid out. Also in this administration's initiative is equity for our livestock producers. So I think the fact that they're picking up and running with some of them is going to probably help us in our effort to reach out to those folks. But we got to call out where that came from. Secretary Vilsack sat in a Senate hearing and said that calf, when it hits the ground, is the same as a seed that's been planted and is ready for harvest. So we made changes to that program to help it more accurately reflect that. We just did a terrible job of announcing it and tying it back to a producer. That's the job that's ahead of us now.
This is what they do, though,
Democrat
right?
messaging.
Like, you know, it's the same thing they did with the regional meat processing facility acts that, you know, Biden put in place. You guys, Zach, put all kinds of money out there to try to build up regional meat processing facilities. You were in the process of trying to get the laws changed so that they could sell across state lines. Trump comes in and says it's all woke, eliminates the funding and shuts it down. And then last week comes back and announces the same program, puts the dollars back in there and says he created the program.
This is,
you know,
I've seen this meme going around, and it's Trump standing behind himself, giving himself a medal, and it's like Trump rewarding himself for fixing the crisis he himself started. Like, and it's so true. He does this all the time.
You got to send me that meme, Jordan. I'll use it.
I'll find it and I'll send it to you. And I think this is a good point to pivot to the people aspect of this. One of the people in the comments, as you mentioned earlier, Will, we're talking about farmers of color and stuff like that. And obviously, I'm not criticizing them for the tone that they were using, but we have a farmer of color sitting right here. Zach, you are not as Mayo colored as we are. And I'm actually curious, you know, how you feel about immigration enforcement going on right now. You know, do you think that ICE is doing a good job.
You, you know, uh, there's a lot to unpack right there, to use the jargon of the day. Let's first talk about the fact that never in my life did I think I would see the American people of any party except law enforcement with a mask over their face and no identification
Mm-hmm.
gathering up people and not giving due process. I can't believe that we are here having this conversation, and that's a reality. The analogy boiling a frog. This frog has got skin
Oh,
blistering.
this frog's
We're
boiled.
well boiled.
We're about ready to start picking meat off the legs.
We
I
want
was
to
more
talk
being
about,
facetious about you're really the only person who's not technically an immigrant sitting here right now.
yeah,
You're an indigenous person and a farmer, and unfortunately, we don't have enough representation of indigenous people in farming anymore. We don't have enough representation of minorities of any sort in farming anymore. Obviously, the African American community used to be a huge portion of the farm community because after, even before slavery was ended, but definitely after slavery was ended, like these are the people who knew how to do the jobs. This was the jobs that they had to do through slavery, that they were forced to do, and these were the jobs that they took, and it really has been whitened up. The farming industry, the agricultural industry, has been whitewashed quite a bit. And so I think that leadership like yours, from indigenous people, from people of color, from minority communities, in this space is incredibly important, and we need a lot more representation of that. And I just think it's funny that ICE is out here running around deporting everybody when obviously, unless we look and talk like you, we're not from here.
yeah, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the work we did for those farmers of color and those other marginalized groups like the veterans, women farmers, young and beginning farmers, and how we were stopped from doing that work. This administration has taken the position that we don't need to abide by district court rulings. We stopped national programs because of a rule of law that we believed in, and that's my brother who is drinking a beer, but he's on the team here with his phone here. But
Big fan.
big fan. First time caller, long time viewer.
Long time listener, first time caller.
But the work that we did to serve those marginalized groups, a lot of it originated in statute and still exists in statute. So we were just advancing that notion that society had decided, hey, maybe it's time we do this. We've seen the generational erosion of the Black farming community. Indian country farming and ranching is on the rise again because of the work of organizations like the Intertribal Ag Council, Indian Land Tenure Foundation, but not without having a fight and having a voice and having advocacy did we get there. And not without the work of a party that was willing to select operators from that class to come in. My counterpart at the NRCS was Chief Terry Cosby, African American farmer who happened to have a career at the NRCS. The general counsel of the USDA under our administration was Janie Hip, a proud member of the Chickasaw tribe. Our party selected people for their commitment to that and not to simply prop them up as a place to point where they say, look, we're including you. We were given the reins to run and given a mandate to go out there and improve service to all folks. And when we improve service to all folks, we didn't purposefully exclude anybody to make sure we were getting it to most folks.
Well, and I mean, under the Republican definition, I suppose you would have been a DEI hire, but you seem far more qualified than, I don't know, somebody who drunk texts war plans to reporters being Secretary of Defense. So, it's DEI brings in qualified people and expands representation that improves all of our lives and all of our situations, because it doesn't exclude people for their color or skin. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Is it's not really diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's anti-exclusion. And I think that we maybe need to start rephrasing it that way, because that's really what it comes into. Is we shouldn't need to diversify, equify, and include these people. We just need to stop excluding them simply because of the color of their skin or where they're from.
But maybe we ask the producers that our administration helped under my guidance and leadership in North Dakota who are selling feeder calves for $2,500 what they think of my DEI hire, because I I've struggled for a long time with the notion of the American dream,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a Native American, and that American dream starts with someone else taking our stuff.
Yep.
By virtue of the preservation of that American dream, and generally speaking, in the however Dr. King put it, the arc of progress tends towards morality or something like that. I butchered that. Your folks in the comments can clean me up on that. But because of that, a college dropout had a chance to run a federal agency and start to right some of the wrongs that he saw in policy in his youth.
Mm-hmm.
There's a party doing that for that reason, which is a whole different set of values that are being advanced compared to some of the appointments that we see in this administration. That's purely about loyalty. That's not about a cause or a set of values or morals that are shared. It's, will you say what I need you to say when I need you to say it? I certainly probably land as a DEI hire, but let's ask that farmer or that rancher in Minot, North Dakota, who's still got his cow herd today, what he thought of that.
Absolutely. But now I want to pivot, kind of as we get towards the end here, and I'm going to rope Will in a little bit more on this now too. Is the human element outside of rural communities and farmers, and why, even if you think that farmers are getting everything that they deserve and rural communities are getting everything they deserve, why you should care, even if you don't care about those people, because it means that you're going to get something that you probably don't feel like you deserve. And the reality is that uh, the loss of a diverse, independent farming economic system drives up food prices, and that is going to affect all of us. It limits the amount of diversity you have in food choices. It limits the amount of quality food you can get. And then with this shutdown and with these farm policies and rural just policies in general that are killing rural communities, um, rural healthcare is shutting down, and that means that your prices are going to go up in your healthcare prices are going to go up across the board because you're going to have, when it comes to supply and demand, fewer people or more people operating with fewer providers, and that's less supply and more demand for that less supply. That means that rural people are going to be driving into the city to access you when you or access your healthcare providers that you normally didn't have to share with now a much wider range of people. And you are going to be paying more for food because larger corporations are going to be buying up smaller family farms that provide some competition for those corporate or for that corporate farming industry. And then on top of that, things like SNAP benefits. SNAP benefits are an agricultural program. That's a USDA program that was developed not to, I mean, in slight ways to help poor people eat who couldn't afford food, but it was designed to help stabilize the agricultural industry to make sure that there wasn't wild swings in food prices, to make sure that rural grocery stores and small town grocery stores and independent grocery stores could stay open. Um, and to make sure that the economic impact of people being able to eat, which is huge, again, one of the biggest things in the world, as far as economic drivers, is food security. And every dollar that we pay in SNAP returns $1.80-ish to the economy, to the GDP. And losing all of that means that your grocery prices are going to go up, your healthcare prices are going to go up, your access to food and healthcare is going to go down. The types of food and healthcare are going to go down. And do you want to expand? I know, Will, you've been talking about this a lot. Zach, you're willing or more than welcome to jump in as well. But I want you guys to talk about that a little bit.
Maybe I could just talk about the healthcare portion of it real quick, just with my personal story.
Yeah.
So when I was 12 years old, I grew up on a 600-acre cow cat. Well, without getting too deep into the weeds, basically it was during the farm crisis. So what we were doing is we were buying the calves off of milkers and we were keeping the heifers for replacements and, growing them up to heifers and then selling them back to the dairy owners, or we were raising the male. I'm trying to keep this for the city folks, trying to explain. So not meant to offend you guys. I know you already know what I'm talking about, but we would keep the steers and raise them up and sell them for beef. So when I was 12 years old, my grandfather and I were out on our farm digging post holes with an old international tractor and post hole digger that had no safety mechanisms on them because we didn't have them back in the day. And I got my left arm caught in the power takeoff of the tractor, and it just almost ripped it off. It pulled several of my fingers off. It broke my arm in 13 places. It completely destroyed the tissue on my elbow. This is all I can do with my hand. What you see is what you get. So I'm a disabled owned business enterprise as a farmer and with my other businesses. But here's the sad thing. When that happened, I laid out on the ground for almost 2 hours just waiting for an ambulance to show up. There was no care flight. There were no ambulance barns. The ambulance had to be dispatched from the hospital where they ended up taking me to, which was almost 45 minutes away. So just the round trip itself, was an hour and 15 minutes, not to mention the triage on the ground. And 2 years after I had my farm accident, and then imagine like for the rehab. So I was in the hospital 2 months. Then I had to rehab for months, and I had like 9 follow-up surgeries. For all of that, every day we had to drive almost 2 hours to go to rehabilitation so I could get what little use I have back again. Well, 2 years after that happened, we built a rural triage hospital called Citizens Memorial Hospital. And my story is one of the stories they used to justify the building of that hospital. So that today, if that same farm accident occurred, I would be in there getting critical care treatment in 36 minutes. And the question I ask is just, in a country like ours, how can you say that it would be better to go back to a 16-year-old kid, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or how their parents voted? How can we make the argument that it's okay for a kid to lay on the ground for 2 hours bleeding out? Because it was just a roll of the dice that I'm still here, guys. And we can control that. You get somebody to critical care within the golden hour, and the likelihood that they're going to live is 80% or greater. And so these changes, to your point you made earlier, Jordan, these are draconian and they have real world, real life effects. And one party's voting against it and the other party's voting for it.
And Jordan, I'll add to that a little bit. I want to talk first about why. Because, yeah, Will, you might get there in 36 minutes, but you're going to lose the farm over the bill because corporatism has been allowed to proliferate here at the expense of the individuals. And there are few within agriculture, there are a few myths that we need to chip away at. First, ag finance is risky. Ag finance is certainly not risky if it's done at terms that meet the needs of the producers. A 3-year operating loan probably isn't what you need. You might need a 5, 7, 10-year loan. FSA's loan portfolio clearly demonstrates that when serving the most economically vulnerable producers in the country, you can have less than a 1% loan loss rate if you offer them terms that help them work it out. The next myth is that ag isn't profitable. Ag is very profitable every single year. Otherwise, corporations wouldn't be investing in it because it's all about the bottom line since Milton Friedman screwed this whole damn society up in the 70s. The last myth, and I want to wrap up my comments with this if we're coming to the end, that there are federal employees out there that don't care. I worked with some of the most dedicated people I've ever been around when I worked at the Farm Service Agency. My associate administrator was in the damn office every day at 5 in the morning and didn't leave till 6 in the evening. My dad always told me if you want to be the boss, you show up before anybody and you leave after them. I had one chance to do that. I had family in, and I had to get up and get them to the airport at 4:30. So I went to the office and I beat Steve to the office. And I told him, Steve, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I said, Steve, you got to get the hell out of here. Why is that, sir? I said, this is my only chance to ever live up to getting here before you and leaving after you. But that's just representative of the folks right now, today, who are in an office somewhere, working knowing that they're not going to get a paycheck for this work, that they might not even get back pay for this work because they care about the producers they serve and they're federal employees. So if we can start by getting those three myths out of the way, maybe we can start to build a message that unifies folks in rural America around how do we change this? And I'm always going to come back to it's got to change the system of finance and have it structured like an investment, and hope we get a chance to get together and talk more about that, either out in DC for your event or maybe on another podcast where we talk through the solution.
Well, I'm glad you brought up our event out in DC because as much as we love to sit here and bitch about the problems of the world, and believe me, we do love sitting here and bitching about them. It's hard to be taken seriously if all you ever do is bitch. And we've been very much gifted an incredible platform, both Will and I, and Zach in a different way with the ability he's had to work within the government. And we're taking a bit of a risk here, and we are deciding to go out to DC. We're going to be out there on November 10th. Will is stopping at some congressional districts along the way that are competitive to help. He's going to drive out there. I'm going to fly out. I'm going to meet him in DC. Taylor's going to join us out in DC, and we're going to do a sit-in. We're going to sit there at Union Station every single day. If we can pull off the resources, we'll be out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 weeks. And we're going to do congressional visits. We are going to bring people whose lives are actually affected by what's going on, by the shutdown, by the cuts in, the big bad bill that they've got. We are going to bring the people whose lives are being torn apart by these horrible, heartless policies and put them in front of the people who are hurting them. And we're going to put that on television. We've got major networks coming out. We've got content creators that are going to be there. We are going to get these stories out there, and we're going to educate people about the stuff like we're doing with you guys right now. We're going to be sitting there at a tent talking to people and educating them about it. We're going to be doing that again on media. And so I'm hoping, we're calling it the Save the Heartland from the Heartless campaign. Again, we're going to be out there for 2 weeks, and we're going to end it with the Remove the Regime protest on December 22nd, which I hope everybody can join us for out there, where we're gonna, march on Washington and bring it to their front door. We're hopefully gonna get a few tractors out there. Will and I have been talking about maybe some bigger protest thing that we can't disclose the details of just yet, but we're hoping to put some stuff together to really make a statement and make some differences in some people's lives. And it's Will's organization, Back 40,
Action.
Back 40 Action, that has been the driving force behind this. So I want to give him a minute to just tell all of you why he's doing this, what got him into doing this, why he was kind enough to bring me along on this journey, and why you guys should support it.
Well, first of all, I wish I was at Zach's house because I can tell his brother's having a good time there. I can.
Posting.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. I love it. The radical beer of choice. No, listen, the bottom line is this. We started Back 40 Action because I just came on social media last summer and I was trying to explain to people some of these issues that were critical to rural America. And thanks to Off Your Wagon and some other creators that gave me a voice on their platforms back when I only had 3,000 followers, our voice got out there and we were lucky enough to build a following. And after the election, honestly, just being the old white guy, I was just going to shut it down. I thought, well, the election's over. And my kids were like, Dad, do you know how hard it is to build a following of, 400,000 people? You can't just shut it down. And in talking with, Jordan and other people, they were like, you can do some good with this. So we created Back 40 Action. And what we do is we advocate for rural America. Now, we primarily focus on 3 areas: rural healthcare, rural education, and better ag and economic policy. We go around the country and we talk about these issues. And this is really the first big project we've taken on. And Jordan and I just really had a chance to meet at Farm Aid, and we just clicked. We just hit it off. It's like we're both rural boys. We both got a platform. what I really like about what Jordan does is he's just got this acerbic wit, and he can say things sometimes the way I wish I still could when I was in my 20s and 30s, and I appreciate that. Plus, I've also learned, and I probably shouldn't say this out loud because you'll probably have people reaching out to you. He's a really good organizer. He's a really, really good organizer. So
Don't tell
we've
people
made the
that. I've been telling
decision.
everybody this entire time I suck at organizing. I'm horrible at it.
Well,
Don't.
that's not been my experience, and you can always edit it out of the final version. But yeah, we're going to
Don't
go
want
out
people asking me to organize.
to we're going to go out to DC because of what Jordan said. I mean, it's easy to sit around and complain. We got to do the hard work, and you don't have to go to DC to do that, but we can, so we are. And what we're going to be doing is bringing in farmers and ranchers who are negatively impacted by these policies. And we're going to visit legislators, but we're also going to let them tell their personal stories to a multiple group of creators that have millions of followers. Because I believe right now getting these personal stories out here are critical to changing minds in the upcoming midterms. We're going to do the same thing with teachers and students. We had the National Rural Teachers Association sign up on board yesterday, and they're going to be sending out students and teachers and sending out a fundraising request for us. And then finally, healthcare. I'm going to be telling my personal story, but I get choked up about this a little bit, so I'm going to try not to. But there's this incredible group called Little Lobbyists, and I've gotten to know them really well over the last month or so. And these are kids with incredibly difficult disabilities. And their parents and these kids are going to come out and they're going to do the same thing. They're going to do legislative visits with us and tell their personal stories because I'm telling you, like, I'm old now. I cry at grocery store openings. I was watching a movie the other day alone in my living room and I started blubbering like a little idiot. But when I heard their stories on a Facebook Live I did with the other day, I just lost it because it's like, how is a country, how can this be who we are? I just can't understand it. And we're not. It's just that the minority in power right now, that's who they are. And they're shedding that evil out on the rest of us, and we want to push back. So we're going to go to DC and we're going to do that. The crass ask is we need money to do it. We need to try to raise $100,000 if we can. And we're well on our way. So if you go to back40action.org, you can donate. And if you want to come out and attend or volunteer, you can.
Hold on. So
Yeah,
our website for the campaign is live. It's savetheheartland.com or
awesome.
savetheheartland.org. Or if it's not live, listening to this live, it will be live by the time you hear the podcast for sure. It's going to go live today-ish, as of recording here on Halloween. So yeah, you can go there and read about what we're doing and donate right from there. But also at Back 40 Action, just want to make sure savetheheartland.com or .org.
That's awesome. And then if you live in the area and you want to come volunteer with us, you can send an email to the Back40 family, all spelled out, theback40family@gmail.com, and we can get our volunteer coordinator to reach out to you and get you plugged in. So we're going to go make some good trouble. We'll all be there. Hopefully Zach will get to spend a day or two and come have fun and make a difference in the process.
Absolutely. All of you guys are invited. You can come volunteer, just hang out with us at the tent when we're out there. Make your voice heard. But if you're looking to come out for just like the biggest impact thing, the 22nd for the protest, it's the 20th through the 22nd. They're going to be doing stuff, but the big march is on the 22nd. It's called the Remove the Regime protest. You can come out there for that. You'll be marching right alongside us and a bunch of other just incredible creators and organizers and entertainers. We're putting together something major. So we're going to be out there drumming that up, making sure that the people in Washington know we're there in the couple weeks before that protest. We're going to be knocking on their doors. I'm going to be trying to find Pete Stauber, whatever. He's my congressman, and he's probably hiding under a desk or a chair or something somewhere because I haven't been able to find him anywhere. See what chair Senator Mullins is hiding behind these days. And we're going to make sure that they know that we're there. So they're prepared to see us march right up to their front door on the 22nd. So please come out and join us for any and all of that you can. And if you can't, please donate. Again, it sucks that free speech isn't necessarily free, especially when money is considered speech these days and corporations are considered people. And that's what we're fighting against. So that's what we're trying to do, we just love to have you on board in any way. And even if you can't donate, because I understand that things are hard, sharing this message, if you can share this out to people who you think can help, that's a huge help too. We just we need all the support and all the publicity for this that we can get to make sure that it is as impactful as it possibly can be. Well, thank you guys. Oh, go ahead, Jack.
Thanks. Just I wanted to share with the folks that do come out. Bring your solution. Bring your idea. Bring what
Absolutely.
you think can fix this, because there'll be folks there that will listen.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it feels like it or not, there are folks in both parties that are interested in solutions. And it's easier if you have one written to get support for it than to try to convey the concept and have them write it and get it right. So bring your solutions to town. If I get a chance to come over, I'll bring mine. And I just want to point out that there are other ways folks can donate. Many folks that might be listening might have some frequent flyer miles.
Yeah.
Buy a ticket for somebody, get somebody there, and think about how else you can contribute, because we're really all much more in this together than it seems. And we agree on a hell of a lot more than we disagree on. Let's work on the things we agree on.
Absolutely.
Amen.
And as always, I cannot thank all of you listening and watching right now for giving us the platform that we have and giving us the opportunity to be able to go out here and do this hard work. I never thought that I'd be in this position and doing these things and speaking on behalf of so many people, and I'm just truly honored and humbled that you all have given me that ability and trust me with that responsibility to kind of take that message and relay it. And so I don't take that for granted any day. And I know that Will doesn't. I know that Zach doesn't, and I know that Taylor doesn't either. And I shouldn't be speaking for them because they're sitting right here. But it is, I just cannot get over how humbling it is. So like, thank you guys so much for putting us in this position and allowing us to be able to do something that feels like maybe we can make a little tiny bit of a difference in this world.
Amen.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Once again, savetheheartland.com or .org. Check it out. Support if you can, and hopefully we will see you guys in D.C. Thank you so much for being here, Zach, and we will see you guys, everybody else, next week.
Great. Do you need us to stay on for this to upload, or are we good?